targets disabled people's access to education, training and employment. We're carrying out a transnational need analysis, and we are looking at the best examples in practice to promote more inclusive and more diverse environments both at work and in the learning settings. Within this scope, we really want to listen to the voices of the people with different kinds of disabilities, different kinds of limitations, in order to understand what challenges they face, what obstacles they have to cope with, and what can help them further their learning objectives as well as their career goals. Good afternoon. What's your name and what is your disability?
Hey, hello. My name is Bouhfas Amal and I am deaf. I cannot hear, so my disability is deafness.
So Amal, can you let us know what are you currently doing and if you ever had a working or a training experience in your life?
Yes, it is actually a very important point because in the past my disability was acquired during my late 20s. So in the past, without disability, I had few training experience, internship during my bachelor studies and other job students that I could access easily. After I acquired the disability, that was around my 25 years old, it became very difficult to find a job opportunity because you just get challenged with many factors, including accommodation that you need so you can integrate in your work environment or learning environment. So now, for now, I am finishing my master degree and I am working as a freelancer because it involves more freedom.
So Amal, you spoke about accommodation and you told us that you are completing your master degree and probably you need some accommodations there, right? Can you further develop this point, please?
Yes, of course. So during university, the university in general, the norm is to take a seat and listen, follow the lecture, write down your notes. Except that I couldn't really hear the lectures and write down my own notes. So the experience is that I went to the service, disability service in our university, and I asked that to have access to the content of the course, to what our professors says during the class. I needed a transcriber, so he could do transcriptions for me. But I've been told that we provide deaf people only with sign language interpreter. Now the trick is that I lost my hearing only recently and I do not know the sign language. So it was just a bit of discrepancy actually, because it was no way for me to understand sign language and no way for me to hear neither. Disability service is very rigid. They just want to help with what they've been provided with in the first place. And so that's put me in a situation of second-hand students. Instead of taking information from the professor directly and formulating them with my own understanding, I was relying on other students' notes. It wasn't very fruitful, so I had to do more efforts than others to access information.
So, Amal, how does your disability impact on your relations with your university colleagues, your professors, or let's say people in general?
Okay, so this is a bit of a tricky question because people relate to them differently, depends on personal perceptions, but the most common feeling is that I feel that I have to prove myself every time to people I interact with. This is because of a generalized stigma about people with disabilities being depicted as incompetent and not being able to perform tasks that were given. So I have always to prove myself constantly and to show them that I can be trusted with the task given. It's a bit tiring and it can just sometimes
Exhausting. Exhausting?
well, it can drive you to an anxiety, a mental
What are, in your view, the main obstacles in training and in employment for people who have to cope with disabilities?
I think that the main obstacles that people with disabilities face in training and employment are mainly the rigidity of the system and a lack of interest from employers to hire people with disabilities. So first we have to understand that the community of people with disabilities is a community that looks homogeneous from the outside, but if you look at it from the inside, there is a certain diversity. This is in the sense that it's a very diverse community and each individual needs adjustments and accommodation tailored to his own needs, and the system simply fails to understand this rationale of diversity within one community. So we provide just a ready-made law that is supposed to fit everyone. And I think that's the second obstacle is the lack of interest from the employers to hire people with disabilities, because there is always a certain ambiguity that arises in the legal process for hiring a person with disabilities, and the employers just sometimes does not understand fully that he needs to provide accommodation for this person to integrate well in the work environment. Sometimes he's simply not willing to pay for this accommodation that the government cannot pay for neither. And so these are really the main obstacles for now that people face.
So, Amel, what kind of approaches are we missing or do we need to face the obstacles we have spoken about?
I think that's on a more social level. The roots of the problem we face is in our social organization, in the social organization of our society. This means that individuals acquire blurred perceptions on people with disabilities because of the lack of education and the lack of awareness, as people with disabilities do not get fair chances to be visible and included. This leads to a certain fragmentation that later spreads in other environments such as the professional ones. And I think that this cycle will simply keep repeating itself until we break it by adopting a more positive approach in our interactions, such as positive values such as integrity, understanding and solidarity.
So, do you think that there is no enough knowledge and education about these topics?
Yes, I think that this sense of strangerhood between communities is mainly because of the lack of education. People sometimes do not always have the attention to not include us, they just don't know how. And
do you have any specific expectations about the ACTIVET project?
Yes, first I'm very grateful for this initiative because I consider and I believe that every step forward is a good step. Now what do I really expect is a more visibility and a more awareness, so people break that barriers that does not let them hire people with disabilities.
What do we need, in your view, in Belgium to overcome the obstacles faced by people with disabilities?
Well, on a governmental level, first I would like to point out that we already have a UN convention on people with disabilities, and it's a convention that's already provided a good legal basis to regulate the work environments and other activities of life. Belgium, for example, to give the example of the country I live in, currently ratified this convention already 10 years ago, but the implementation remains weak. So in my point of view, I think that we should work on implementation in the first place, implement the already existing regulation. Second, and it is directly linked to my previous point, which is austerity measures. We constantly have budget cuts in the governments, and they are often on the accounts of people with disabilities and their well-being. This does not allow them to provide them with the needed accommodations to be included in work environments, for example. So I think that these are the two main points to tackle in the first place.